While Battlefield 2042 is on its way out, let's take a look at a new Battlefield style game that is also going to be free to play. This is Delta Force Hawk Ops. Delta Force Hawk Ops is being developed by Team Jade and published by Timmy Studio Group, which is a subsidiary of Tencent. I know that one sentence alone is going to make some players complain, but Tencent is everywhere. And at least if you are trying to avoid them as much as possible, well, at least you know to avoid this game as well, even though it is free to play and won't cost you anything but time to try it out. Fortunately, I did play the current alpha test and it is in a really good state right now. There are some bugs and issues here and there, but nothing that has been game-breaking in my experience. The game is very well optimized and easy to run. I haven't noticed any kind of drastic frame drops during gameplay. Be it going against vehicles or explosions, everything works really well. I'm sure there are some issues with the netcode or server stability, as there may always be, and from my first impression, that hasn't been getting in the way. And these servers feel way more stable than my typical match in Call of Duty, where it feels like the servers are constantly being DDoSed. While Delta Force does a lot of things right, and there's a lot to get into, there are also a few concerns that I have that could make it less appealing over time. But for now, let's dig into the game and discuss what problems it may have later on in the video. The weapons in Hawk Ops are somewhere between Call of Duty and Battlefield. They're not recoilless lasers out of the box, but with the right setup they can be. The game has an attachment system and actively shows what are the benefits and consequences of each attachment. There is no guessing game here as to what is the best or what will help you out the most in accuracy or mobility. The game shows you those values up front. Along with this, the game also has an attachment tuning system, allowing you to adjust the pros and cons of the attachment and have it better fit your playstyle. When using magnified optics, there is a fair amount of visual recoil that can take some time to get used to. While there may be a set of attachments to make that more manageable, if you want to run a weapon full auto, you're better off with a 1x optic. And the game features one of my favorite types of optics, with a 4x zoom optic and a 1x on top, so I can make the most out of my setup and land shots at long range. The visual recoil should be tuned down and less drastic than what it looks like right now. This game clearly isn't trying to be realistic, and I would prefer to have the visual recoil look more manageable than what it does now. Because Delta Force is a Battlefield style game, you don't necessarily need the fastest possible handling like you would in Call of Duty. It actually does make sense to turn your CAR or M16 rifle into a semi-auto DMR type rifle. There is a fair amount of flexibility since not every gunfight is going to be up close and in your face. In this alpha, while we can have up to 5 different loadouts we can set up for each character, you cannot swap attachments mid-game. If you set your AR to be used for long range, then you will be stuck with it unless you created a second loadout. Maybe that's just for the alpha test. It would be great if we could swap out attachments mid-game instead of having to make a few preset loadouts and swap between those. Leveling up weapons is also fairly straightforward and easy to do. There is a grind if you want every weapon maxed out, but leveling up a single weapon can be done fairly quickly. It doesn't feel like I have to use the same gun for an entire day to get all the attachments, or to get useful attachments anyways. Of course, this is an alpha and the early days of this game, so there may be a hidden meta that people will gravitate to. But for now, you can take advantage of the variety of weapons and attachments the game has to offer and still do well with them. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this video so far, please like the video and consider subscribing as we make our climb to 1,000 subscribers. This alpha test only features 2 maps for their large-scale rush type game mode called Havoc Warfare. These maps are called Ascension and Cracked. With Ascension, the battleground takes place at the base of a mountain where the attacking team has to take over a couple of outposts and a facility. After that, the battle moves to the top of the mountain with 3 more objective points, 2 of which are inside the mountain itself, and the last one is on top. The map provides a fair amount of variety, with the first 2 points being great for long-range combat and snipers, while the shootout inside the mountain makes for some fun close-quarters combat with a few sniper spots. However, the fight within the mountain is very linear. It can make for a frustrating experience if you don't have a tank or LAV on the attacking side. Even then, the last point within the mountain has the defenders shooting down 3 narrow lanes where the attackers can come from. Yes, this objective can still be taken over, but it is a slog of a fight, and matches will die on this one objective. The second map, Cracked, is a desert-style map based on one of the Delta Force games, where the attacking team attempts to take over a small city. While the map is still fun to play, there isn't a lot of city-style or indoor combat, as one of the last objectives is a hangar across the street. It still plays well and can be a lot of fun regardless. It's a more simple map that gets the job done. And there is a third map, called Zero Dam, that is being used exclusively for the Hazard Ops game mode, which is the game's version of an extraction shooter, complete with storage, sorting options, a base to level up, a firing range, vendors, contracts, and more. Hazard Ops is closer to Call of Duty's DMZ mode, but it does have bandages, security boxes, and other features you would see in a game like Tarkov. In my opinion, it's a revolution of gameplay within the extraction shooter that could make it very appealing for those like myself, who don't really like the game mode. Now, if you just really hate extraction shooters, there's nothing here that can convince you otherwise. However, if you stayed away from them because of other games like Tarkov or even Arena Breakout didn't really fit your style, I would recommend trying out a few rounds of Hazard Ops. I also don't want to overhype this and say it's the next big thing. This kind of game mode hasn't been explored a whole lot and are going to have different variations of it over time. We've seen this with Battle Royales. PUBG still does exist, but it's no longer the premier BR game. That belongs now to Warzone, Apex Legends, and Fortnite. That's not just because they are BR games, but it's because they change up the formula and have their own unique gameplay. I know there are some people who think extraction shooters have already been done to death, but there's only like 3 of them. Tarkov, Arena Breakout, DMZ, and now this. There are also a few indie games out there, but most of them don't really have a big audience, at least not to the scale that Tarkov has. Some people may also want to throw in Hunt Showdown to that list of extraction games, but it does play very differently from the rest. So there is still a lot that can be done with this idea, just that Hazard Ops is doing more of the same in its own way. As a really quick side note to the maps, most of them work out really well. However, there are some areas where it's difficult to vault or mount over certain objects and terrain. Getting over a small area of rocks seems feasible, but when you try to jump it, the character slides off. I'm not expecting every section of the map to be accessible, and I understand the importance of having certain routes be limited. There are just a few areas here and there that should be easier to move around in. Along with that, the maps we do have access to have very little destruction to them. There are a few buildings within objectives that can be opened up, and that's about it. I hope the developers have some more ideas for destruction to affect each map in more dynamic ways, such as being able to open up a new entrance to a bunker, or having some light Levolution style destruction of taking down a radio tower or something else that can open up a side of a building. We also haven't seen a Conquest style game mode where this kind of destruction can be more appreciated and dynamic. While it can ruin the flow of a map for the more linear rush type game mode, I would like to see if the other maps, and if there are any other modes, to be less static and provide alternative routes that can be discovered to allow us to move around without lining up into 1 or 2 routes. I also do think what I'm asking for is fair. In their earlier trailers, they were showcasing the maps having destruction. I don't expect every inch of the battlefield to be destroyed or for the maps to be very dynamic. I know that can cause more problems than what it's worth. The game's movement is slowed down compared to other games. Even Battlefield 2042 has smoother and faster movement. I can't really say that Delta Force feels clunky to me, but there are some situations where the lack of movement does get in the way. There is only one character who can slide, which feels strange. And it's not so crazy beneficial for it to make sense that only one character can pull this off. I do think they can benefit from allowing every character to slide, and simply give that assault character a faster or longer slide, or keep the slide the way it is and change their passive to simply being a faster character. Someone that's going to be more difficult to die from snipers. I wouldn't ask for the movement speed to be insanely fast, maybe about 5% faster than everyone else to start. So less experienced snipers are going to have a lot of trouble trying to land a shot on this kind of character. There are, of course, concerns to make sure the game stays balanced, but this movement does need to be looked into, not only to make the game feel more cohesive, but so players don't feel restricted when using another specialist. The last thing you want is to have a character with too much movement and now no one wants to use anyone else because of it. Alright, now let's get into something more controversial. This game features specialists similar to Battlefield 2042. However, the gadgets and abilities these specialists have aren't necessarily game-breaking. They also don't require you to play a certain character in order to do well. Along with this, each character is still role-based. meaning you cannot equip a medic or ammo bag with any character. Everyone will have their own benefits, and if you don't care for their abilities, you don't need to use them. Just simply pick the character that has the weapons and gear you're looking for and go. As it is right now in the alpha, for the Havoc Warfare game mode, there isn't an overpowered specialist. Each one has their own gimmick, but none of them can take over the lobby. One of the more useful character abilities is the Recon Bow from Luna, which acts as a UAV in the direction the arrow travels. You get a few pulses from the arrow, see where everyone in the area is at, and then it stops. I know there are some people who outright hate specialists, and there is no convincing them to try out the game, which is perfectly fine. As it is right now, these specialists don't dictate how I play the game. There is a fair concern though that as they continue to add characters and abilities, that they'll end up releasing specialists with crazier abilities and makes the game less enjoyable. For now, we can only see the game for what it is at its current state. If you're on the fence about specialists, at least for now in this build, it's not that big a deal. Who knows what happens at launch or a few months later when they add more specialists. This is a concern I and many other people have been pointing out, which is, especially for the Havoc Warfare game mode, the lobby is filled with bots instead of players. Another thing that is annoying is some of these bots also have TTV in their names, which I do consider to be scummy, trying to pretend that there are more streamers playing the game than there actually are. I don't know if this was just a joke gone wrong, or if this is a ploy to make the game look more popular than what it is. Even though the game has a lot of coverage, and a lot of positive coverage at that, and a fair amount of hype since it was announced. I'm not sure who thought it was a good idea to do this. Now, there are reasons to have bots in a large-scale game mode like this. With this being an alpha test, they may not have enough players to fill each lobby, so they want to make sure that each game is as filled as possible. This could also be a part of their onboarding system, where they give you a few easy games, with the lobby being filled with mostly bots, then slowly start to place you in lobbies that are mostly players. I could also look at this in a very negative way, where they may not have the ability to host a game that is made up of only players. Instead of these matches being 64-player lobbies, it may be 32 players and everyone else are bots. This may just be an alpha build thing and nothing more, but it's still a concern everyone should have. As far as I know, we haven't heard anything from the devs about this, and I would like to hear an answer as to what's actually going on. Whether this is simply temporary, or if this is to avoid having full-size lobbies, even at release. I don't mind seeing bots in the lobby, but I'd rather them not count towards the lobby size. So for instance, these matches are to have 64 players. Let's have 64 real players, then a dozen or so bots on top of that. Whether or not that's feasible for the developers, I don't know. I do think bots can play a role and act as a distraction. It's even more useful to have them around when trying to fight through some very restrictive choke points. But I'd much rather have a full lobby of players regardless. With Delta Force Hawk Ops being free to play, it is definitely worth trying out for multiple reasons. Whether you just want a fairly accessible and casual experience of playing Havoc Warfare and running around a large battlefield, or if you want to try out another extraction shooter that you may find enjoyable. The game so far is very well put together, even in its current state. And while there are some rough areas here and there, it's nothing that can't be worked on and improved. The developers have made a great first impression in terms of the UI, the game modes, the map sizes, and overall gameplay. Now I'm just concerned to see what their thought process will be when adding new specialists, how the maps are going to be playing out later on, and what's going on with having so many bots in a lobby. Let me know what your experience has been with Delta Force Hawk Ops, and if there's anything in this game that you are looking forward to. Also, if you've gotten this far in the video, please drop a like and consider subscribing for more gaming news, highlights, and more. The second half of this year is going to be a busy one, so stick around, and until then, I am Mr. Rain, and I'll see you next time.